Welcome to the Self-Centered Podcast, a space where centering the self is the first step to rethinking the systems around us. In this episode, we're asking, how do we rebuild connection in a world where we don't even share the same reality anymore? Where our feeds, friendships, and fears are all pulling us in different directions. With Sophie Beren exploring what it means to step outside our comfort zone echo chambers without confusing discomfort with harm, and Matt Klein mapping how our digital environments turn relationships into performance and opinions into identity. We'll double tap on how we might co-create systems of connection that can hold friction, nuance, and trust, even amidst the noise. Let's get into it.
All right, let's talk about relationships, huh?
Shit.
This is going to be a therapy session for Olivia. No, for both of us, honestly. But I'm excited to talk about relationships because I do think that both you and I really value deep relationships and have a lot of expectations. So tell me, my friend, where are you with relationships?
I think if we're talking about friendships, I think I've gotten to and am working through a level of honesty in communicating my needs and desires from relationships. I think in moving to LA almost 3 years ago, which is crazy, I moved here kind of in an isolation era where community was not necessarily something I was prioritizing. It was actually, my social life was, if you do like the wheel of life and you rate on a scale of 1 to 10 where you're at in every single area of your life, like every single area was on a like 3 to 4, but social was on a 10. You're living in LA. You don't even know that many people. How is your social life still at a 10?
Yeah.
And also, based on where I'm at and what I want to prioritize, is my social life being at a 10 something that is necessary? No. So I like had to actively deprioritize social, start saying no to things, stop feeling like I need to be out, like finally get comfortable like being in the house by myself on a Friday night. Like that is something that a version of myself would feel deeply uncomfortable with before versus today I can't wait to like be alone and have a solo weekend. And so I'm kind of swinging the pendulum back in the opposite direction of I don't necessarily desire being isolated. I am proud of the work that I have done to get comfortable being alone and by myself and not needing to like chase or escape whatever it is and feel, not even feel comfortable, but feel comfortable moving through the emotions that come up when you don't have external parties.
There's a level of mastery there.
I'll never forget during the pandemic, I had a coach and we were having a conversation and at one point she goes, but you do know that you do need other people, right? And I was like, I don't know about that. And I think I am starting to grapple with like, what do I desire from other people? What are my needs? What are my expectations? And how do I get more comfortable with communicating those things? I travel so much, so like nobody ever knows when I'm in town. So that creates a dynamic where people are going to assume that you're out of town. So then it's on me to communicate, oh no, I'm like actually in town. Is anybody around? But I felt so much anxiety by texting the group chat because like, what if nobody responded? What if nobody was available? And like, I do feel a lot of anxiousness around like the rejection of like putting myself out there and like somebody being like, oh, I'm not available or, oh, I can't do it. And of course the friend that I like didn't hit up was like, oh yeah, I was thinking about you too, but like I just didn't know. And it's just like I'm working through the communication piece of it and the vulnerability piece of it on the friendship side, on the dating side. I mean, I moved to LA 3 years ago, have not dated once since moving here. I can't do it without the pressure.
I know.
Historically. I won't say that on a go-forward basis, but like it has been this very high pressure thing where I'm so much more focused on like, does this person like me versus do I like this person? I will say, and I'm in an era of my life where I can relate everything back to Love Island, but like I have actually been like triggered into a place that I'm a highly addictive I have like a highly addictive personality. And again, if I do anything, I do it full out. And like, it's been a long time since I've been obsessive about anything. And this couple on Love Island sent me into like a manic state.
Why?
Because it's a Black woman, a white guy, and she was kind of like the therapist of the villa. Everybody went to her with their problems. And so she really struggled with prioritizing herself, putting herself first. I already knew everything going through her mind behind, like, she grew up in Alabama. A guy like him never would have been interested in her ever. Like, her friend was interested in him first. They were coupled up first, so she didn't want to get herself in a dicey situation. She could not see his like blatant interest in her. Like, there was just so much in her that was like, I identified with so deeply. And then watching her be like cared for and loved has like, it cracked open this piece of me that I had repressed so deeply of like, I want that more than I ever even knew I desired it.
I'm so happy to hear you say that because the last time we had this conversation, what I was hearing is that you were really stuck on you needing to be kinder to yourself first in order for you to be in a relationship where you could be cared for. And I think this is such a good place for us to start this conversation because sometimes there are things that cannot be healed alone.
Yes.
And you need to have a relationship. You need to feel connected to another person in order to realize what needs to be healed and then bring it back.
Completely. And I think a lot of it is also like something I struggle with is once something happens one way, one time, my brain believes it's going to have that same outcome every single time. And I think like there's a certain level of healing that you can do in solo, but like you have to be triggered to show yourself that you can respond in a different way. So I agree. I think there has to be that level of triggering for new call response dynamics to show that like you are not the same person you were when you experienced that trauma or so on.
I was actually just listening to another podcast with Gabor Mate, I think is how you say his name, but he specializes in trauma and addiction and healing through that lens. So very like severe, abnormal things things that we label as abnormal. And he spoke specifically about romantic relationships and romantic partnerships as oftentimes the person that we will be safest with or the person that we can be in the healthiest relationship with is the person who triggers all of the things that we lacked in our childhood or in the way that we were parented and cared for up until that point, because they're showing us that those things can be fulfilled and can be true. And that can be really uncomfortable. And so sometimes our initial response is to ignore that person or to step away and detach or
test them.
That's
me.
She's like, it's me on the problem. But I think it's really important to acknowledge the fact that sometimes like one thing can come before the other. So being in the relationship can heal you individually. It doesn't have to be one or the other. It can go both ways. And also sometimes we kind of pull away from what can heal us. And it is important to challenge yourself and to put yourself out there. So I'm excited. Are you going to start dating?
You know, the short answer is yes. How I approach it, how I engage with it, I don't quite yet know. But I think there's a desire to be maybe like ramp up my social life to put myself in the spaces, meet new people where like it's a connection of a connection. I think that's the approach that I want to take.
And starting there.
Yeah, I think if I were to jump to the dating apps, it would kill the exciting energy that I have.
And your perfectionist mind would come in real hot. Yeah, no, I think for me, the other thing that I have been really focused on, so we're both part of the Let It Break community. And I just had my initial like meet and greet orientation and it was so lovely. And in that environment, they asked a question about like, what our intentions were for the rest of the year. And I never really get asked that question. Like, I'm usually the one that is asking the question. And in that moment, I was like, wow, reciprocity is something I need to be relentlessly focused on. And what I mean by that is just getting as much as I'm giving in all the relationships in my life. So beyond my marriage, I do not expect Dylan to give me everything that I need. Mm-hmm. That is an unrealistic expectation to have on someone. So that requires me to get really clear on what I need from each person in my life or within each category, right, of relationship, whether that's a peer or someone I'm mentoring. Like there's so many, it's a spectrum. Mm-hmm. But I think that this is incredibly important for me, and I'm sure that other people can relate in some way, but it's important because I don't think that this was something that was modeled for me as a kid. I think I was conditioned by my environment in some intentionally, some unintentionally, to overextend in order to receive love, to receive care, or to get something back. I had to be the one who took the first step of giving or doing the act of service in order to get. And so that is my default. Any relationship I go into, I mean, I think you know this about me. Like, I'm going to be the one that does that cold outreach. I'm going to reach out. I'm going to put myself out there. And it has served me in so many incredible ways, but it has also hurt me in, I think, more ways where I will allow relationships to go on for so long where I'm holding it together by a thread. And then when I do put up a boundary, I get these insane reactions because I set that expectation. And I've had to be real with myself. It's like, well, this is the friend that I like. If I put myself in a friend's shoes, of course, like I'm the friend that you go to when you like have a problem and you want to solve it. I'm the friend that you go to vent because I'm a good listener and I create space for that. But I'm creating too much space to where they're taking that for granted. It's a normal thing. It's not even valued really anymore. And I see that in just so many relationships. So I'm like in this phase where I'm really just constantly asking myself, am I getting what I'm giving? And it doesn't have to be the same thing, right? That I'm giving, that I'm getting back. And it doesn't have to be immediate, but I need to feel secure and like I trust that this person will do that. And I think you are a great example of that for me in my life, where I know that what I'm giving, I'm going to get. I know that if I listen to you, you're going to listen to me. And I've shared things with you that I haven't even shared with family members or certain friends who are my best friends that I've known for a decade now, because I know that we create that space for one another. And I think that is just really special.
I agree. I think, I think reciprocal love is something that like I have journaled about, thought a lot about, because I think in past, like I identified deeply with you of being the person that people go to, and not really feeling like, I don't know, like when I was growing up, I never had a group of friends. I was always friends with like so many different people that had a group of friends.
Me too.
So I was like the outside of their broader dynamic. And like that leaves you feeling like in the center of a bunch of different circles that you're not actually a part of. Mm-hmm. Now I think there's truth in this, but I think a lot of my truths come out of like coping of like, I don't really enjoy groups of friends because I think the reality of like everybody actually enjoying each other's presence and like getting along is not real. And I don't like being fake. So that's how I kind of have like grappled in my brain of like, I'm cool without having a group of friends because that means I don't have to like be around people that I don't actually like. I was in a sorority in college. That so like I lived that.
Oh,
fully.
well, that feels connected.
Yes.
Yeah.
But so I think my question to you in being your friend, I have an understanding of your boundaries or that you are a boundaried person. I don't necessarily have an understanding of your needs. And I think like that's been something that's interesting for me in the newer relationships that I'm building in LA, where I have a friend who literally asked me, she was like, yeah, I don't really know what your vibe is. Like, do you like to go out? Like, is that something that you're interested in? Like, I don't really know what you're about. And I have found myself feeling some type of way where like, I'll see people being out and being like, oh, like, I wonder why I wasn't invited to that thing. But like, if people don't know what you need, they don't know how to show up for you and they're following your lead so often. And when you are a leader, it's really unnatural for you to be like, hey, well, like, I actually need this. It's easier to be like, I don't want this. I don't want this, in this.
Which you're so right in that. And I think that's why it can be jarring for my friends in some ways, or people in my life, family members, whatever, even my parents, where I'm like, I put up that boundary. I have no problem being like, I can't do this.
Yeah.
I'm not going to do that. I need to take a step back. But you're right. I am not proactively communicating the need.
And you're natural, and I'm this way as well. My natural inclination is to anticipate somebody's needs.
Yes.
And so the fact that I feel like you're one of the few people that I know that like I see anticipating what Olivia might need. But like, while that is nice, it's also unrealistic.
There's a sweet spot here.
Yes.
How to get there, much to be explored.
I agree. And I also think by anticipating somebody's needs versus having the conversation about their needs also causes you to miss out on like deep bond building.
Absolutely.
Like it's very thoughtful to be like, wow, this person like anticipated that, so amazing. But like the magic that happens in the conversation of communicating the needs and then showing an openness, a willingness to respond and receive and all of that. Like there's a bond that gets created there that I think we often miss out on because we're just anticipating and then we get known as the anticipator.
It's funny because I think this is the way that my husband holds up a mirror to me so often, because I'll come in and I'll start a rant about something and then he'll share something and I'll be like, and I'll have kind of a defensive response perhaps to it. And he's like, well, then what do you need from me? Tell me what you need. Do you want support and just me listening? Like just that uncomplicated support where I'm just here, you can vent and I will receive that? Or do you want me to problem solve with you? And every time I get so frustrated because I have such a hard time articulating what I need and I'm not totally sure. So I'm figuring that out. Mm-hmm. That's where we're at. We're both there, which I love that in different ways.
I agree. I also think like acts of service for me, when like the love language conversation comes up, like acts of service is like, I held it up on a pedestal. Like like words are one thing, actions are another. I'm realizing like, oh no, like actually like words of affirmation would be amazing. Really quality time would be amazing. Like I am finding value in these things that I really discounted their worth.
Yes.
And I think like it's going to open me up to feeling so much more depth in relationships than I have felt historically.
To help us explore what it means to reconnect across difference, we sat down with Sophie Beren, founder of The Conversationalist and a unifier committed to helping Gen Z break out of echo chambers and into real, honest dialogue. Raised as the only Jewish student in her grade in Wichita, Kansas, and later immersed in sameness at the University of Pennsylvania, Sophie saw firsthand how both isolation and homogeneity can silence us. That realization led her to build Table Talk, a multi-campus movement rooted in conversation, which eventually became the Conversationalist, a platform empowering over 100,000 young people to use their voices, challenge polarization, and build bridges rather than walls. In this conversation, we explore what it takes to stay open in moments of discomfort, how to navigate difference without collapsing into fear, and why courageous conversation might be one of the most powerful tools we have for healing division.
So often when we're trying to force people into new communities or new conversations outside of their own, there's this culture of fear of the unknown, but also fear of being in proximity to or close to someone who you resemble as bad or extreme or the opposite of your values. It always starts with being very clear about your intentions so that the other person knows why you want to have it. And then also getting what I call conversational consent. It might sound silly, but we have all been in a conversation where we have been blindsided and someone jumps right in to have a really hard, sometimes traumatic conversation with you when you are not in the right headspace, you are not prepared, and you are not ready. And getting someone's almost permission before you start having the conversation, so you're both agreeing to it and letting them know why you want to have it, sets you up for a balanced interaction. Otherwise, someone's back will be up against the wall, or you won't get the actual essence of the conversation because someone's going to be defensive or on edge the entire time. We go into hard conversations with the expectation to change something about someone else. And I have come to peace over the past decade that ultimately people do not change and you cannot expect them to, but people can evolve, which is why I think it's so important to have a mutual understanding of why you want to have it in the first place and that both people are there showing up to have it. Otherwise, to me, that doesn't feel like a conversation. I do think we've started to equate safety and uncomfortability in a way that's allowed people to just bow out of an interaction as soon as they're uncomfortable. And I think it's important to determine what is safe and what is not for yourself, but also acknowledge someone else as a part of that equation. And there's a big difference between being unsafe and uncomfortable.
All right, let's zoom out. So, relationships. What are the biggest problems, biggest gaps right now? What is keeping us up at night? I think if I consider what Matt and Sophie had to say too, and just patterns in their responses, there's a handful of things that stand out to me. So first thing is right now we are really lacking in critical thinking and listening skills. And specifically those skills in order to navigate conflict or to tolerate different points of views and to empathize with people who are different from us and different from us even in like severe ways, right? Because there's a spectrum of differences that we have to be aware of. And so I'm curious, like when it comes to critical thinking, because I think critical thinking is a skill that both you and I do have, and listening. Let's just like toot our own horns for a minute. Yeah. I do think that we are great critical thinkers and great listeners. Was critical thinking modeled to you? Or did it show up at what point do you feel like you started to do that, I guess?
So again, I think a lot of it was born out of feeling different than other people and wanting to understand what I was missing. I for so long felt like there was just this inner like knowing that other people had that I just didn't. And like the things that they were doing felt unnatural to me, but looked so natural to them. And so like it was a wanting to feel a sense of belonging and feel a sense of enough that forced me to think so critically about things. And then I also think like, I mean, my family, our dynamic is like we've never had a casual conversation in our lives. Like it always turns into a debate about something. And I think there is so much beauty in that, in the sense that like from a young age, my parents treated me like an adult and had conversations with me that like made me feel like I could have a voice or an opinion or a thought. I think like the piece that both my brother and I are grappling with now is like in looking at other family dynamics where it's just like, oh, let's like sit and play a board game or like whatever. Like we didn't really have that. It was like you sat at the dinner table, you have the debate, and then everybody went into their four corners of the house to do whatever their solo activity was. And like I would then be attracted to friends' family dynamics where like they were just all kind of like shooting the shit and nothing was that serious and nothing was that deep.
Yeah.
But I think like my family dynamic, my mom is an author, had a radio show. My dad's an anchor and reporter on the news and comm. So like communication and like waxing poetic, was something that was very, very core to my family dynamic.
So your parents are people who were questioning things in some ways, or the world around them, or they were. That's a big part of what they did. I mean, journalism, media.
Yeah, it was. Honestly, it was less about like questioning and more about like making sense of. I think like a superpower that I have is like somebody can explain something to me and then I can regurgitate it back to them like in a way where it makes sense to them. So like it wasn't like challenging things. It was just like, here's a thing. What haven't we considered, or like how do we make this make sense given what we understand and what we believe, essentially?
Yeah. My skill for critical thinking comes from my parents telling me that I could be and do whatever I wanted, and that just because they were a certain way or the people in my life at that time were a certain way, I didn't have to be that way. I looked at every person as an opportunity to learn and to almost like kind of mirror it back to myself. Well, which parts of this person do I really like? Or which parts of this person really like energize me, that make me feel seen and heard and valued, or that I am noticing make other people feel that way? How can I bring that with me? And that's something that I feel like I carried with me where I never believed the surface. And I think that that has like allowed me to look at things in a way where I can observe before I personalize. Mm-hmm. And that's a big part, I think, of critical thinking. And I think like today there is just, that is not something that is taught. Mm-hmm. It's not, and it is so essential to us being able to live with one another, especially with the time that we're living through right now and everything that is going on. We have to be able to observe and personalize. It cannot be either or. I'm curious. None. Yeah. Or none.
Yeah.
Right? It can't be that. And I think like this is also related to, which this is like my hunch, is the lack of critical thinking skills, the lack of listening skills is really like a core cause of mass isolation and loneliness, because we're looking at things and we're writing them off. Mm-hmm. We're like, no, not for me. I don't agree with that. And and social media is like exacerbating this.
To help us explore the systems shaping how we connect, we sat down with Matt Klein, a cultural strategist, writer, and Webby-winning thinker whose work decodes how technology, media, and design shape our emotional and social lives. Across a decade of trend forecasting and cultural analysis, Matt has advised everyone from the Met to McDonald's, UNICEF to Google, helping organizations understand not just what's changing, but why it matters for our relationships, our identities, and our collective behavior. His acclaimed publication zine reaches readers in over 100 countries, offering deep research and provocative insight into the overlooked trends shaping how we relate, perform, and build meaning online. In this conversation, we explore how digital systems influence our tolerance for friction, our sense of reality, and our ability to be present, and what it might look like to redesign our environments for meaning and connection rather than convenience and performance.
So maybe we take one step back to really understand what's happening here, which is, before we can even define it, maybe we acknowledge that technology and media itself is not always neutral, especially when it comes to our relationships, that it often distorts and skews our perceptions of what's happening. It is skewing our perception of audience in ways that is very different than our relationships in offline experiences. We are now forming relationships on a stage. And when we form a relationship on a stage, we are not behaving organically. We are performing. Now, that isn't really entirely that new of a concept. There's a sociologist, Irving Goffman, who proposes this idea of a self-presentation, where in every social interaction, we are performing to a certain extent. This is way before social media ever existed. And the idea is we're on stage, and based upon who is in our audience, we are positioning accordingly, based upon what we're wearing, how we speak, vernacular, body movements, right? We're posturing. This is not to say we're lying to any audience or, deceiving them, but who I am to my friends at a bar is very different than who I am at a Thanksgiving table. These platforms play as a third party or third wheel to a lot of our relationships. And in some cases, it's healthy and it's productive. At the same time, they're also doing speaking on our behalf, where it's like, whoa, wait a second. I didn't ask for that. That's not actually how I feel. That's not what I'm kind of get at or trying to get at. And what can you do about it? You can't really do anything because it's baked into our communication medium. I formed incredible relationships on online platforms that have transcended to offline spaces. So to opt out is simply sometimes unfair, because we're kind of tethered or shackled to these things.
We've talked about this before. I'm curious, how much tolerance do you feel like you have for people with opposing views? And I'm curious, have you thought about the spectrum?
Growing up, I never felt like I related to anybody because I grew up in predominantly white spaces. So inherently from the start, I was different. So it was not just like, okay, I'm going to be around these people who are just like me. And even it doesn't just come down to okay, take this Black girl who's in predominantly white spaces and put her in Black spaces. Still feel different because all of my lived experiences are in predominantly white spaces. The people I felt discriminated by the most were other Black kids, not white kids.
Yeah.
And so I think the starting from jump as being at face value different created an openness to a full spectrum of people. And I think when you get all of my friends into one space, the room looks extremely diverse, but the core quality of the people and the connections that are able to be made that never would have been made before had I not brought these people together, it is the quality of the being versus the individual characteristics of them. So I think that I have a high level of tolerance for people because I am trying to get to know them underneath it all versus them at face value. Now that crumbles, of course, to some certain extent.
Yeah.
I'll never forget during the George Floyd of it all, I was doing a lot of conversations on my Instagram story with people, and really had a moment of crisis where I felt like so many of the people that I would consider really good friends of mine were silent and didn't say anything. And I was like, you've been to my home. You've been to my birthday parties. You've spent time with my parents. This is not some fake shit. If you really deeply care about me, you will not be silent in this. And then that did spark a lot of my friends to get off their asses and put themselves in the uncomfortable position to have a conversation. But I'll never forget, there was this DJ in Baltimore who like my friend and I were obsessed with. Like he always played the songs that we wanted to hear, most of them by Black artists. And he came to the table with an opposing view that I was like open to hearing for sure. And I thought we had what was a productive discussion where we heard each other out, and he ended up blocking me on Instagram. And I was just like,
yeah. Mm-hmm.
I felt some type of way about it, in the sense of I thought we were able to have a discussion where like I didn't need him to share the viewpoint that I shared. I just wanted to be heard. And I think that like in all of this in relationship, what I desire is I'm not optimizing for being right. I'm optimizing for being heard. So like the way I'm going to communicate something to you is in a way where like what I understand about you, what you care about, what you value, I'm going to communicate it through that lens.
You
so
translate.
You can hear me for what I'm saying, not make you feel dumb or make you feel wrong, whatever it is, make you feel embarrassed, because then you're not going to hear me. So I think like I have a high level of tolerance for it. I think like that's lessened as I've gotten older, and like what I want to prioritize is like not having to over explain myself or not having to question certain things. But I think that just like changes the depth of the relationship that I understand us to have versus wanting to connect at all.
Yeah, I think so. To this example that you're sharing here, this person blocking you, obviously there was no such thing as like a mute button, a mechanism for blocking.
Which I use that mute button heavy.
I also am a heavy muter. I mute if it's becoming a pattern where I'm noticing, oh, every time I see this person's content,
I'm feeling some type of way.
Mute. And that's honestly, I do that not just for myself, but for that person. Because I'm like, I don't want to put this negative energy out there. Like, let this person do them. But I don't have to unfollow, right? Maybe this is more a reflection of where I'm at right now. And this is bringing up something that I envy, that I want to see in my own life. And I think that's like an important part too, because I think that because within Western society, we have such an obsession with individualism. It is so easy for us to be like, you're annoying, block, and then never open that channel back up again. Which I think it is really important for us to question that, because individualism is really getting us nowhere at this point. It is not serving us. It is what is creating these like insanely dangerous echo chambers where we truly, especially now with generative AI and it being so accessible, algorithms, all of it, like we do not have a shared reality anymore. That is what individualism has created. We do not have a shared reality. And if we do not have a shared reality or shared truths, just like fundamental fucking truths, we cannot coexist.
No.
And then we cannot survive.
Yes.
Like, I think we need to be...
It's very spooky.
It's very spooky, but we have to actually face the fact that the way that we are acting and our behaviors are... we will become extinct. Like that will happen. I'm not saying that's going to happen, in 100 years, but it will happen. We have to face the mortality of it all because it's really real. And if we continue on this path, it's awful. And I think Sophie, and I want to bring this up because I think Sophie gave such a great example of the lack of shared reality when her friends in Kansas were not aware or connected to the Israel-Palestine conflict at all. It was not something that was important, or they really just like did not give a fuck about it, versus her friends on the East Coast who are living in cities like New York, right? Or even on the West Coast in LA. So people who are exposed on the coast, let's say, more to these things, more progressive. That is so concerning. Because that's war. Like that's geopolitical fact, right? To acknowledge we are living through a genocide that's happening. And there are right here today, we're sitting here recording this podcast, and there are people who are starving and dying and being bombed. And like that, we have to feel connected to that. if we cannot agree on a truth that that's happening, we are losing humanity. Like, we are losing the essence of who we are.
Without immediately being like, well, for me,
100%.
well, my family, well, we weren't talking about your family. We're talking about this thing that is happening and is real.
Yes.
Period.
Facts.
The best way, in my own words, to describe an echo chamber is an environment that can form both online or IRL, in which you only encounter the same beliefs, opinions, and perspectives that reaffirm your own. And these can form in different communities. They can form on our algorithms and our news feeds on social media, and they can form in our families and our social circles, and even in media. It's learning how to assess what echo chamber you're in order to hopefully break outside of it. And the best way I can describe it personally to myself is growing up in Wichita, Kansas. I found myself in a very interesting echo chamber, as I was the only Jewish student in my grade from K through 12. And so for a lot of my life, I was brought up around a very homogenous community, predominantly white, Christian. I was actually the odd one out. And then going to the East Coast for college, I found myself in a different echo chamber, very progressive, very liberal. Echo chambers have become kind of synonymous with our modern day communication styles in our communities. And my mission with starting this movement and platform is trying to help people acknowledge the echo chambers they're in far earlier than I did. And I think the moment you step outside of your echo chamber is when you grow. The ongoing social media echo chamber, which is still individual to whomever's echo chamber it is online, has, I think, become the most polarizing and has actually led to a lot of change in attitudes, in voting behaviors, in kind of how we perceive the world as it stands today, right? Scrolling down your newsfeed and only seeing a similar perspective that might reinforce your own, or one that you weren't aware of, but now you're going to be stuck in an information cycle that is of one singular perspective. And when you don't have access to other perspectives, you start thinking of those perspectives as reality. And I think that's when, misinformation can start to cycle in, and eventually there's like a radicalization swing that happens too when you start to think that that is the only way of thinking. And a great example is, the ongoing war in the Middle East. Some of my friends from home don't even know what's happening, versus a lot of my friends on the East Coast are up in arms and are, it's consuming their every waking thought. The biggest echo chamber challenge for us is when we equate echo chamber with comfort zone.
And that's the thing. Why can't we first? Because I see this play out in my friend group also. Because I'm very grateful that I have a very large, diverse friend group, and we do all really get along, and we can debate and, get through it, and everything is fine, and it deepens our relationship. But I see it play out all the time in conversations where instead of first just acknowledging the shared humanity, just acknowledging this is an awful thing that's happening that is unacceptable. And there are not enough people who care about it, full stop. Before, like you're saying, getting into all of our individual opinions and experiences, like before we make it about ourselves. We are so obsessed with ourselves.
Yeah.
It's like such a problem.
Yeah.
And we have to, again, I do think it is, obviously the echo chambers are a problem, but the other thing that Matt brought up, which I don't know if you remember this, but this one really kept me up at night, actually. When he spoke about the feed as being a trough.
Unplugging is not the answer. I think in this moment in which we feel as if, hey, these platforms are not entirely serving me, I'm going to smash my phone and, adopt the digital Sabbath dumb phone kind of analog lifestyle, which I think is aspirational, but it's also very unsustainable. especially as so many of our cornerstones of society are built upon now technology, banking, education, housing, whatever it may be. It's dependent upon technology. And second, it's unsustainable because meanwhile, the rest of the world is finally getting connected to the internet and finally having access to digital technologies and smartphones. So right as the rest of the world is coming on, I think only a select few are saying, well, this isn't working for me, so let's, burn the thing down or, smash the phones. With that, I think there's an in-between, which is kind of what we've been hinting at, finding a sense of responsibility and mindfulness. The reason I think it falls upon us is because the platforms aren't incentivized to remind you it's time to take a break, right? It's literally called a feed. Like a feed is literally a trough. Like it wants you to keep eating and eating and eating. It doesn't want you to say, hey, maybe you're full, time to go.
It's genuinely designed for us to just keep feeding. And that is such a reflection, again, of individualism, of capitalism, where it's like gluttonous.
Yes.
And we are gluttonous with our personal ideologies and viewpoints. Like that is where we are. I'm curious, like, is this, I guess, how do you combat that in yourself? Because I think we all are guilty of this, where we're a little gluttonous with our own.
It's really interesting. I think a lot of our conversation is self-focused, right? And like right now we're talking about this like individualism and like what's that creating and how self-obsessed we are. And like I think there is a toxicity side of the spectrum that people over-index on. Yes. But like I do think the first step is actually to go inward and understand what in me is causing me to react this way, and how can I create more empathy or understanding or so on with myself so then I can bring it to the outside.
We are, in a way, developing a generation of people who have learned a set of tools and a language that allows only for their own mental health to be considered in certain equations. And I think sometimes there are a lot of young people who we see kind of coming in and out of our platform who really only want to have a conversation when it's worth their mental capacity, when ultimately it takes the other person out of the equation. And you are only responsible for your 50% of the 100% of a relationship, which gives you immense, peace of mind when you cannot control anything or anyone outside of yourself. But when you don't give 50% to the 100% of a relationship and just set a boundary when it's convenient for you and doesn't take someone else's mental health or relationship into account, it's a really interesting imbalance.
Which is something that everyone has control over. What I will say is that social media platforms make it very hard for people to take that step.
Oh, yeah.
Because it's back to the trough visual. It is biologically, psychologically hard to pull away. And this is where those platforms, those companies, the way that we're designing products is so incredibly important. Because to Matt's point, what he said about backstage time and how we are just starving for a backstage. And that's also part of why a lot of people are now gravitating to AI chatbots as a way to freely express themselves. And, there's obviously AI therapists now, or messaged as therapists, not necessarily actually providing therapy. And so many people are gravitating to that as this like new space to kind of have it. But also at the same time, there's a danger there, especially with who's in charge of building those products, because that's another echo chamber. Unless all of these platforms bake into the design a prompt or some incentive.
Counter narratives,
for people to reflect and to do that exploration that you're talking about.
That's literally take one more step backwards to where we left off with Goffman. So Goffman's whole theory was that there was this thing called a backstage, where, at the end of the day, you take a shower, you're about to go to bed, like you are backstage, like you're able to decompress, you're alone, your thoughts kind of bubble. It's super messy, but like it's intimate, and your makeup's off, whatever it may be, metaphorically. Yeah. If we relate this back to online spaces, there is no backstage, right? There's no place where you are hidden and able to kind of take off whatever costume or performance you currently had on. So I think it is that lack of backstage that's contributing to our anxiety. So to relate that to the whole AI intimacy, I think that's as close to some backstages in online environments that we can get to, where like there's no eyes on me. What's being discussed is between me and my AI companion. Yeah. And I think that's incredibly refreshing for some people. We lack backstages. I think the most profoundly impacted relationship is the one with ourself. We haven't carved out a whole lot of reflection time, alone time, that we're able to form that relationship with self. We're also in a moment where we've made it very easy to find convenience, or to find answers that fit existing narratives, or to find people that give us the messages that we want to hear. And I think we currently live in a culture in which we are so good at optimizing those things away that because we're offered the alternative, or kind of the off-ramp to not have to confront those things, we've done it. And I think a result of that has been, well, I don't know, I'm not going to say this is causation, it's probably more correlation, but as a result of that, we're facing a pretty grim anxiety crisis. And the irony is perhaps leading a little bit more into the friction and into the discomfort is what may, dissolve some of that anxiety. Now, I would argue from studying culture and our relationship with media, the frictionlessness and the infinite likes and all of that stuff is not helping us as much as perhaps a little bit of a journal entry and a headspace session.
I think this naturally gets us into starting to explore like what are the biggest opportunities for change and like bright spots and all those things. Something that I have seen recently that feels hopeful in some way, shape, or form. And I know you spoke about dating apps. And obviously, Matt said this too, like they're not currently designed for people to get off them. Even if they claim...
Even if that's the tagline.
Even if they claim so. Obviously, they benefit from having more people on the platform and coming back. But something that I did see recently is Esther Perel did a partnership. Did you see this? She did a partnership with Hinge recently.
Oh, really?
She completely redesigned their prompts and the way that the profile is designed.
Really?
Because her whole thing, like, where should we begin? It's all about invitations and storytelling and finding ways to go deeper quicker. And so she completely redesigned that, where instead of it being things like, what's your like favorite food? Like surface level shit. It's more these questions that encourage people to have the backstage time and to reflect and share stories maybe from their childhood, or when's the last time you felt awe, right? Or questions like that. Questions where you really have to think about it and tell a story. But I think it's so important for us to connect through stories. And that's the thing. Instead of going to like, what's your favorite meal? Or like, what do you like to do? Oh, I like to run. I like to paddleboard, whatever it is. That's not a story.
Yeah.
I can't connect with that. That's a hard way to open up and to then ask somebody out on a date. Like it just doesn't feel as natural, or it doesn't mirror the way that it might go in person, to your point about wanting the first step to be having natural interactions and exposure. And I think this is something that, yes, in the short term, we can create our own habits for reflection and go into these things more intentionally, but we have to be louder and more vocal about ensuring or asking for the people who are making the decisions on behalf of these platforms and the way that they're designed. We have to make sure that they are considering this. And it's a better balance or mix of ease and friction, on stage time and backstage time. Because to our shared experience too about like we both were dancers growing up, and not all performance is bad, right? Public speaking in a way is performance, but it's incredible. It can affect large scale change, right? Like people can adopt an idea through that performance. So it's like, it's not all bad. It's again, not an either or, which I feel like I'm always like both end.
I agree. I also think, I think the storytelling piece really resonates with me. And I think like going back to my childhood experience and like who my parents are, I think story was always such a big part of it. Like my mom's first book was the core story, or I guess this was her second book, was about this parking attendant who like worked outside of the studio and like how he built like a 6-figure portfolio by working outside of a bank and just talking to the people and learning like little bits of what they would share with him. And like, that's how he created like financial freedom for himself. Like story is so core to, I think, how we coexist as a society. It's why media is so important, attractive to us, and why we engage in it, and why it creates discourse. But I also think story can be our prison, right? I think self-story is so the more we buy into it and the more we solidify it as truth can be challenging, which is why one of my favorite things to do with ChatGPT is say, what are my blind spots? Like, I had a moment where, I don't know, I was feeling very like restless, and because I was trying to rest and I felt like I wasn't being productive and wasn't doing anything. And I was like, you know what? 2026 is going to be the year where I yada, yada, yada. Let me get on ChatGPT. Okay. In 12 months, like what's the plan? Like, how am I going to do this? What am I going to prioritize? And then I was like, okay, now read me to filth on this plan. And it was like, you don't need to be optimizing for anything other than rest. Like you are chasing this like desire to like achieve and experience success, but like in reality, that's not going to bring you what you need. You know, that's just going to leave you feeling empty. And like having that counter narrative of like, it felt so good. I felt like so energized. I had this dopamine hit of like, okay, I'm going to do this. Like, and like, I get such a high off of like making the plan and building the perfect plan and the perfectionist fantasy and all of that. But I also think like self-story can be dangerous in a sense of it's like hindering your ability to evolve beyond what was once true about you, maybe. So I think like continuing to update the story and like what's true now versus what was true before, I think is powerful. And I think the more we share story, and that's where I think like the feed giving us access to different stories is powerful and beautiful and critical. And I think like it's how we, I don't know, I think rebuild what a shared reality actually looks like. Like, does shared reality mean that we all have the same experience? No. It's just like, where do we create the space where we can have the shared story about our individual experience without one person's experience meaning the other person's experience is less than or not true?
Yeah. I think this is also where television and film is so important because I think people can be more objective about it. And it's such a great way to show people a different reality from their own without it becoming immediately personal.
Because they're not centered.
They're not, exactly. It's not like being in your everyday life and you're on your feed and this person is a follower or someone you could where it does start to become more tethered. I do think what we did not really get an answer to in both of the conversations that we had with Matt and Sophie is language around relationships and how to actually like identify and articulate them. And so what I mean is like the spectrum of relationships we're experiencing today are so different, right? It's relationship to self, it's relationship to other human beings, it's relationship to technology, then there's a subcategory, parasocial relationships, right? That is a lot. And these are things that we have not dealt with before. And so I do think, and Brene Brown is big on this, right? In terms of like creating language around things and how that can help us heal. Because really, if you don't have the language to describe and articulate what you're going through or like what's happening to you as a result of these systems or these environments that you're having to interact with or exist within, you can't really heal that. Like you can't really fix a problem or move forward if there's not language. So I think I'm not the person to do it because we're not the people to do it because we're not, a psychotherapist or whatever. But I do think that we really need more people who are equipped to give language and to validate these experiences. Because I think that oftentimes parasocial relationships are seen as trivial. Oh, that's childish. But I think it's like this part that I don't validate for myself. And I think I almost like categorize as flippant in my life, even though, wow, this could have a huge impact.
Yes. No, it is real. We now live in a shared reality where parasocial relationships are a part of existing.
Yes.
Okay, so if that is true, how do we dig into that bucket of relationship and figure out like, how do we navigate it? Like, what are the boundaries that exist there? What is healthy parasocial versus unhealthy parasocial? Yeah. Like, I think something that my therapist that we've been working on is like, again, I've spent so much energy in like, how do I like be a different person? Like, how do I become a person that is like this versus honoring who I am? And it's more about honoring who I am and how do I move to the healthier side of the scale of who I am versus the unhealthy scale of that. I think inside of different relationships, okay, this is a reality. Parasocial relationships are now just a part of the human experience. What is the healthy side of that spectrum? What is the unhealthy side of that spectrum? And how do we do the self-exploration?
Exactly.
And then the communication between each other to navigate it.
Yeah, we have to take it seriously.
Yeah.
Because I think, again, going back to childhood and just kids today, they're having parasocial relationships. And I don't think it's okay for a parent or a teacher, for example, to be like, that's bad.
Yeah.
Because now they're going to hide that from you. They're not going to trust you to talk about that. And that's where we're going to see dangerous things.
And it's impacting them.
Yes. Like they're having emotional reactions.
Yes.
And that is valid. It is natural and it is normal. And we have, again, back to the normal, abnormal piece. Like these are things that are normal now. And we have to accept that. The other thing here in terms of like where it feels like there's opportunity for change to happen, to go back to what I said about teams, right? So people who are in charge of designing these products, I think that there could be a way within, this is government, right? Where it's like there's some type of federal policy or incentive for companies to ensure that there is a multidisciplinary team on staff when creating a new product. So for example, we're seeing bright spots happen with that in the startup world. So like this is relevant for me, but Parallel, which is a wellness brand. They have all different supplements for women in different stages of their life, of health. So like conception, menopause, all this stuff. They're actually the only company that offers that product that is also staffed with an OBGYN, like an actual doctor. Like think about that.
Yeah.
Full stop. And also Orna from Couples Therapy, the show, she's also now on staff with a company as well. I can't remember what it is, but with some sort of therapy software and company. That to me, we need that. That should be happening all the time. You need a multidisciplinary team that where also not just that you're bringing on, let's say like a clinician if we're dealing with healthcare, but also you're bringing on somebody who might be like often overlooked in this conversation. Like perhaps you have a focus group and you bring a child into the like imagine if you were designing a tool for a social media platform and you had a kid actually come in and be a part of the conversation.
Yeah.
This is shit we should be considering. Because you're creating a product that you want to serve them, include them in the creation of it. And my one client, I feel like I'm learning so much about this specifically through my one client, Ariba Jahan, who does this for a living. She is specialized in responsible innovation, consumer and product experiences. So she is the person like going in and infiltrating these systems and requiring people to, the word she uses, to co-design with the people that you're serving. And like that to me, again, if we incentivize that at a high level where it's like there are repercussions for that, like, I don't know, maybe just like a fine if you put a product out there and you didn't run it through. I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe that could change something.
Yeah.
I'm curious if that brings up any other thoughts for you.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think like co-creation is a word that has been very top of mind for me. And I think it is a through line between this entire conversation that we've had, because I have a friend who's in a relationship and she was navigating like the longevity, like they've been together for a few years. Like, is this my lifelong partner? And like one of the concerns was like, well, they come from this family dynamic. I come from this family dynamic. And I'm like, I think the most exciting part about a relationship is the opportunity to co-create what you want the future to be, what you want to create. It's not about this is where I came from, this is where I came from. It's like, okay, here's what we're coming to the table with. What out of your world do we want to recreate? What out of your world do we want to recreate? And then what's new that we can bring to the table? I think that like the opportunity to co-create, I think that's where social media could actually be a very beautiful, powerful thing to give you access to co-create with people that you never would have had access to, or co-create leveraging information that you never would have had access to. I think that the brightest opportunity is co-creation if we are able to not use our individual experience as like a weapon or a defense mechanism, but as a tool.
Yeah, it's the ego of it all.
Yeah.
Really. It's like if we can separate ourselves from that and still also give weight to our own personal experiences, right? It's like just because you're inviting other people to contribute doesn't mean that you're losing anything.
But then there needs to be rules for contribution, right? Because I think these comment sections are fucking crazy, and you need to stop telling people what you think they should be doing, because that's wild behavior.
It is absolutely absurd behavior. And I mean, I think that opens up a whole other conversation around how to regulate discourse online in order to create a more healthy environment.
And not silence people.
Yeah, which we have not really seen a great example of. One thing that I will say, I was just reading about this yesterday, and the person I'm subscribed to a newsletter, Casey Newton, I want to say, is the name. We'll fact check that later. But anyway, they were talking about Chat GPT 5, and they've released some new safety features and regulations. And instead of the feature being very either or, where this is bad or this is good, like that being the way that it thinks and the way that it regulates, instead, if you, let's say, put in a prompt that could result in a dangerous response from the chatbot will actually say, I can't give you an exact answer to this because this might lead to dangerous outcomes. However, if you're interested in XYZ, here are other alternatives to explore that, which is really interesting, because I think the only things that we've seen around safety regulations when it comes to like discourse online or like with technology has been either or.
Yeah.
It's bad or it's good, right? It gets taken down or it doesn't. Whereas the solution probably lives somewhere in the middle, where it's like we can acknowledge that this and tell this person so they can critically assess it also, maybe, right? And maybe we deter them, tell them this probably is dangerous for you to touch. So let's pivot it in a different direction. And obviously there's lots of other concerns around OpenAI as a company, but I do think like that feels hopeful.
Encouraging, a bright spot.
A bright spot. All right. So what do we want people to chew on? We covered, again, Covered a lot of ground.
Remember when at the beginning of this I said shit?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Here we are.
Here we are. I think duality in the sense of, I think self-exploration in the context of relationship is always critical. I think communicating your needs is a fundamental part of relationship, and I'm excited to see both of us navigate what that looks like for us, and
me as well,
and put it into practice. And I think the other thing for me really is like, what does it look like to embrace co-creation, even in how like I approach dating, right? Like, what if I came to the table being like, yeah, I haven't dated in years. Like, I really am interested in like creating a different dynamic and approaching things differently and trial and erroring different things. What are you bringing to the table? And like create the opening for that level of co-creation. But I also think like in working on this project with you specifically, like I've seen the power of that, right? And I think we talk about like doing one thing in one aspect of your life and then figuring out how that can come to life in other areas. I think like the amount of just growth and expansion that I've felt in doing this project with you and being open to different perspectives or things that I never even considered. I think I want to kind of encourage people to identify opportunities for co-creation more.
Yeah. And not to get so attached to the outcomes. I think even in relationships, right? We get so attached to the outcomes. This person is going to be my life partner.
Yeah.
This person is going to be my best friend that I'm going to do we attach immediately these desired outcomes onto the people that we're interacting with. And I think we have to let go of that. We just genuinely need to pause and ask ourselves, what can I learn from this person, right? How does this person make me feel? What do I agree with? What do I not agree with? Because I think you need to bring that even into your like very, very close. My best friends, I'm still like, I don't agree with that. And then next step there is like, if you can't openly talk about that with that person, that's a signal. That's something that you should listen to and you should trust, because that is not co-creation.
Yes.
If someone is not giving you the space to do that, and then you're also not giving space, like that's not healthy for any party. And also I think too, and this is something that I work with my clients on a lot, but when you're in those situations where you're around someone who makes you feel hot, you know, like really, like you're hot, your heart's thumping. And sometimes, right, you have to be able to decide, is this safe or is this unsafe? That needs to be something that's mentioned here. But I think it is so important for us to lean into, like, take a breath and just try to understand. Like, even if that person, just for a moment, like, isn't doing that here and then, just ask like, okay, well, why do you think that way? Because sometimes when you do ask that question, they then will give that back to you and you'll be surprised by the outcome. And I think you can apply that even to how you engage with people online as well. So just breath, some box breathing, and ask yourself, you know, how can I try to understand this? All right. I think that's all we got, huh?
That's all we got. That's all she wrote.
All right. Well, thanks for joining us again. Self-Centered Pod.
That's it for this episode of the Self-Centered Podcast. We hope this conversation reminded you that connection isn't something you scroll into or opt out of. It's something we co-create moment by moment in how we listen, stay, and tell the truth when it would be easier to disappear. If this episode resonated, the most self-centered thing you can do is leave a comment, rate and review, or subscribe to our newsletter to help us grow this community and keep these conversations going. Thanks for listening, and as always, stay a little self-centered.